Welcome back to episode 8, or AKA really part 2, of episode 7, but it's going to be episode 8 of the Muscle Room podcast. We're now joined by Scott Strauss, retired NYPD ESU, AKA the Emergency Services Unit. Probably one of the most, if not the most prestigious units to be in, not just with the NYPD, but probably, I would
in law enforcement.
Yeah, in the world, probably. Because, sure. I mean, everybody knows NYPD ESU. Even if you're not a police officer, firefighter, medic, I mean, everyone knows ESU, which is a pretty cool title to have, right? I wish I was ESU. So, for those of you that are listening right now, if you're a captain or above, take a look at my application. No, I'm kidding. I didn't apply.
What a slut.
Maybe later on. In my career, we'll see. I got to lose like 45 pounds first. So, Scott, welcome to the Muscle Room podcast.
Thank you for the invite.
Pleasure to have you. We've been friends now for a few years. You're big supporter of Law Enforcement Officers Weekend, and when we had reached out saying we want to do a 9/11 series, you were the first person to jump on it and said, I would love to help you guys out anyway. So thank you for being here, supporting the podcast, supporting our organization. It means the world to us. So thank you so much.
Great work, and I know it's not just you, the groups that are here, but there's a whole slew of you that are involved in taking care of law enforcement families. Thank you. Well,
we appreciate it. You've been sitting in, of course. You just heard the story of probably the most unbelievable story that we're going to have. Yeah, a riveting story from Will's account of just survival. We want to now let our listeners and our viewers get the other side of the story from, I guess we'll say, top side, right? Mm-hmm. So in the NYPD, we have top side, which would be the cops who work on patrol, and then we have our transit cops who work below grade. So we call it top side. So essentially, that's kind of what it was, right? I mean, you were the top side of the story. But before we get, I guess, into that, tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got into law enforcement, and you also hold a different title now, right?
Sure.
Get into it.
So. Graduated high school, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Law enforcement. I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
You want to edit out? Sorry.
No. Don't worry about it.
Trust me, Austin messes up all the time. Constantly. We just let it go.
Yeah.
I graduated high school and wasn't sure what I wanted to do, get into college. And I was in college, and I'm not. I was a very good student for the classes I like to be involved in. Not so much about the other ones. Not a big fan of school. But a couple of my friends and one of my professors at the time said, hey, you should try taking a couple of civil service tests to be a cop. I'm like, it's not something I really want to do. I'd like to be a lawyer, but I wasn't a fan of school. So I took the test for the NYPD. I scored very well on it. And next thing I know, I get a call from the investigator. And my investigator says, all right, we're going to start your background check, and we're going to get into the next class in the academy, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm not sure I want to do this. And he was like silence on the phone. He's like, well, why'd you take the test? I'm like, I don't know. I just took the test. And he said, well, can I ask you what you want to do? I said, yeah, I'm looking to be an attorney, but I don't want to I'm not really a fan of school. He says, well, listen, if you do 6 months in the academy, then you never have to go to school again. I'm like, well, sign me up for that.
Yeah.
So I went through the academy, had a good time.
What year was this?
This is 1984.
Wow.
And got out of the academy. It was an NSU 3 at the time. I know things have changed, but it was
kind of sort of, but not really.
Yeah, FTUs and
all
that stuff. Impact, kind of the same but different. Did 6 months in the Midtown, and then I went to the 4-3. And the funny part of that was I got into the academy with a guy that I worked with in Mineola on Long Island as kids in a store. We worked together. Jimmy Dupont and I worked together in a store, and we got into the academy together, went to Midtown together, and we ended up in the 4-3 sector partners together. And so when I applied for ESU, as did he, but he had his eyes set on highway. I got called for ESU. He got called for highway, and we parted ways.
So, question: as somebody who didn't even want to be a cop, how do you go from being a cop to then going to ESU, which is like the elite, right? Because what's the saying? When the police need help, they call ESU, right?
Yeah.
So how does that happen?
All right. So
He was good in some classes.
I had a friend. I was in a volunteer firefighter in Mineola, and I was in Scouts. And I can out myself. I'm an Eagle Scout, and my Scoutmaster at the time was in the issue. And so I thought it was pretty cool. And he says, "Listen, when I got on the job, he had already been retired, probably 8 years or 10 years or so." And he said to me that, "Listen, I could probably get you the interview, but that's probably just a favor to me, meaning to him. To him. But I can't guarantee you getting in. So you just got to sell yourself." So that's what I did, and I went there. I was 23 years old. I had my lucky suit on, and it was a contentious interview. 3 battle-scarred lieutenants with racks of medals, and the one guy on the left was just torturing me, and the lieutenant. And any question I asked, I was asked, I couldn't give the right answer to, and I was like, "What the heck, man? This guy would just shake his head, and no, that's not it." And the other 2 lieutenants were like, to the point where they were looking at him like, "Why are you torturing this kid?" And so the one lieutenant was running the show. He says, "Let me ask you a question." No, he says that the other 2 lieutenants, "Anybody have any other questions for the applicant?" And the guy who was breaking my shoes says, "Yeah, I got one." And he leans across the table and he holds up a resume that I had given in, and he goes, "You better follow effing directions as a police officer. Did we ask you for a resume, or did we ask you for an application?" So I said, "Well, sir, you asked for an application, but I didn't think it covered enough of the information that I had to offer, so I gave you a resume." And he says, "What makes you think I give a flying about you and your resume? And you're already not following directions." And I'm like, "Ooh,
Damn.
yeah."
Wow.
And he says, "And you sure it says on here that you're an Eagle Scout. What the F do you think that means to me?" And I'm like, "Oh boy, things aren't going well for me today. I'm probably going to go to Staten Island."
Burn this suit because
It's not lucky anymore. And I said, "You know what? With all due respect, it might not mean anything to you, but it means a lot to me. It was a goal I set. It took me years to achieve. And I just thought it was important to you to know, or whoever read my resume to know that if I set a goal to myself, I'm going to achieve it." And he leans across the table and points his finger at me, and he goes, "Let me fucking tell you something." And I'm sitting back like, "Oh my God, no." And he goes, "I'm an Eagle Scout too." So he was baiting me
The entire time.
the entire time.
Yeah.
And 6 months later, I saw him. He came up to the truck. And I was up in the Bronx at the time, and he says, "Listen, I just want to see what you'd say."
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's a cool story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got into that, he told me that put me above, because everybody's got hooks, everybody's got phone calls. I know it doesn't mean much anymore, but at the time it did. And he said that put you over.
Wow.
So I got in. And
How long were you a police officer before you became ESU?
3 years.
Oh, okay. So,
That's 3.5
pretty,
years.
pretty quick.
It was
typically.
very quick.
Yeah.
Now I know it's 5 years, but you had to, at the time, you had to have at least 3 years.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I applied as soon as I could, and a friend of mine said, "All right, I can get you the interview, but you got to sell yourself."
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's 3 years, so the
1987.
87. Yeah. Okay.
So fast forward, I did worked with my same partner for 13 years, Gerard Kirchler, and we were up in 3 truck in the 4-3 from 87 to 96. And then from 96, both of us went down to Lower Manhattan to 1 truck, and he retired on my birthday in 2001. He did his 20, and that was it. And I had 2.5 more years to go, so I obviously stayed. And then September 11th happened.
Just to help paint the picture slightly, we do have a lot of listeners, of course, that are NYPD or Port Authority, Nassau, Suffolk, State Trooper, et cetera. So they all know what ESU is. But we also have a lot of listeners who are from Middle America, and they don't have the resources that we have here in the New York metropolitan area. Can you just kind of explain what ESU is?
Yeah, sure. The Emergency Service Unit is the SWAT and rescue team. We handle everything from barricaded perpetrators, people looking to jump off of bridges, car accidents. We cut people out of cars. We assist the bomb squad on big jobs. We handle building collapses, train crashes, you name it. We go there, and we don't leave until the job's done.
Right. So you do it all, right? Isn't that a slogan on one of the trucks, actually?
Anything, anytime, anywhere.
Yeah, there you go. So that kind of just paints a very broad picture of what ESU does, but exactly the reason why you were there on September 11th and what you ended up doing, later that night. So yeah, go ahead. Let's get into it.
So on my day for September 11th started on September 10th. I worked midnights, and my September 11th, I believe, was my first day in. So I was up all day on September 10th. My two boys, Brian and Christopher, who are police officers today in the NYPD. They were 9 and 6 at the time. They were going to school on, I think, Tuesday. There was that day was their first week of school, full week of school. And I didn't sleep all day on Monday the 10th, and I go in September 10th at night. Tour starts at 11:30 at night. In the Adam 1, which is a small rescue truck, with Kenny Winkler, who he and I got into emergency together, because like I said, my regular partner had retired 6 months before. And he did a tour change to work that night because he had some babysitting issue. Uneventful night, couple of pin jobs, maybe a perp search or something. 8 o'clock rolls around. I get on the train to go back to Long Island, and Kenny stays around a little bit. He had to do something to do in the city, or wasn't no rush to go home. I'm reading Monday's newspaper on the train going home. Finished with that. I'm dating myself, obviously. It's 2001. I put my Walkman on. And,
well, you said newspaper. They're not around anymore either.
So. You're right. So I'm listening to a radio station. I'm talking about a plane crash, a plane that struck the Trade Center. I'm like, I thought it was a joke to be, at the beginning of this, and then they continue with the seriousness, and I'm like, oh, this is no joke. But I'm like, it's a beautiful day. How could this possibly be? Maybe a small plane, Piper, Cessna, or something. A guy had a medical emergency, and he, just hit the tower. They were doing some serious talking. I get off the train. I race back home, and my two boys were in school. I thought it was be the first full day I'd get to sleep, actually, instead of spending watching them all day long. And then I yelled to my wife, "Hey, there!" She was getting ready to go to work. I said, "A plane just hit the Trade Center," and I turned the TV on, and she's like, she came into the den just as the second plane hit. And I knew then we were under attack. Obviously, there's you two planes hitting the Trade Center, not rocket science. I'm like, oh, I got to get back to work. I go into my room. I grab some clothes, some t-shirts, underwear, and stuff, because I knew we were going to be there a long time. I didn't think the buildings would collapse. Rewind a little bit with the Condé Nast building in Midtown. There was a crane accident where it broke away from the building, and it pierced the apartment building across the street, and 1 or 2 people got killed. We were there for 15 days.
Wow.
So I knew we were going to be here for a while.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I just grabbed some clothes, and I jump into the car. Neighbor comes running across the street crying. She says, be careful. I said, no problem. I got to get to work. And I get up into, I was a volunteer chief at the time in the fire department in Mineola, as I was in the chief's car, and I'm flying along the expressway, and I go in through the Midtown Tunnel. I come out of the Midtown Tunnel, and it's kind of gridlocked, right? And there's no cops to direct traffic, right? There's no traffic agents directing traffic. Everybody must have been moved downtown. There were civilians in the street, though, and the civilians were directing traffic. They were trying to pull emergency vehicles through.
Wow.
So I get down to my building on 21st Street, down to Truck 1, and the guys that relieved me were already down at the Trade Center. The buildings hadn't come down yet. All the other off-duty police officers from ESU or from one truck are coming in, and we're grabbing gear. We're grabbing weapons. We're grabbing heavy vests, helmets, and we're grabbing rescue equipment. And we knew, like I said, the Adam car and the truck were down there already. But we're just grabbing everything and anything. We knew we were under attack. But we didn't know what the extent of the attack was, what else was going to happen. There's no military in Manhattan at the time, so it was going to be us defending the city, but we also had to do a rescue operation. And that we do rescue and tactical work. So we get into a bunch of vehicles, and we start heading down downtown. And Sergeant Gene O'Connor, he stops he was kind of leading us. He stops off at a construction site, and he gets out of the car, and he goes, and one building had come down now, right, just as we were leaving. He stops at a construction site, and he starts talking to the construction workers, and they got payloaders and bulldozers and things. And he says, hey, guys, you know, the towers got struck by 2 planes, and they didn't have any idea what was going on. And he's talking just so nonchalantly, you know. And we're like, Sarge, let's go. Let's get down there. Let's get down there. He's like, all right, hold on. Well, if you guys could pack this up and start heading down there, we're probably going to need your help. You know, we're like, Sarge, let's go. And so he's like, we finally get down to the trade center, and we got there just as the second tower finished collapsing. Had he not stopped asked those guys to help out, it could be a different story.
Yeah.
So we were searching, started to search, and then they pulled us off, and they said, everybody go to the City Hall Park. So our unit, emergency service unit, went to City Hall Park, and they were trying to regroup there. The guys that were on that were caught in the collapse and were there for the collapse from all over the city were walking up, and they were just covered in dust. They were hurt. Their arms, a couple of arms were broken. I mean, bloodied mess. And we were just asking, hey, have you seen so and so? Have you seen this guy? Have you seen yeah, he's over here. You know, we're just trying to get an idea as to who's who. And so were the bosses. So they lined us up, and they started to break us up into 2 groups: tactics and rescue. Because again, we were under attack. We had no idea what was coming next, and we had the city protect, but we still had a rescue operation to undertake. So they'd say, all right, you 5 are on rescue, you 5 are on tactics. You guys are on rescue, you guys are on tactics. And they split us up. I was on a rescue end. The guys that were on tactics took heavy vests, helmets, and some of our weapons. And before we left one truck, which is next to the 13th precinct in Midtown, just below Midtown, is the police academy at the time. And underneath the police academy is an indoor range where you can go and qualify. The range officers came up and they're like, hey, give me some guns. So that we were giving them rifles and machine guns because, again, we were under attack. So we get down to the trade center and we get broken up. I got assigned to the rescue end. And they said, grab some equipment and you're going to go to this area and you guys are going to go to that area. And it was very difficult to figure out where to go because streets didn't exist. These 2 buildings came down and caused massive destruction. So we went down, we were coming down, I guess it was Broadway, and we made a right on Vesey, and Truck 9, one of the big trucks from Queens, is burning. And it was like, what the hell? You know, it's chaos. So we grabbed some equipment off of that truck as well, and we started searching every cavity, every opening we could find. We crawled down an escalator because the roof of the escalator, where the escalator was down into the path below the trade center, had collapsed. So we crawled down the stairs of the escalator, got down. You couldn't go anywhere, so we had to inch our way back up because it was very difficult. We had air packs on, like the firefighters wear. I had a rope harness on. I had my gun belt on. Very difficult to move around. We crawled all the way back up, and we searched in this void and that void, and we were finding body parts and parts of bodies, but we weren't finding anybody alive. All day long, our own guys were getting hurt, slipping, tripping. They were twisting an ankle, breaking a leg, getting cut up on the jagged edges, and just the environment that we were in. And while we were searching some of these crevices, we were hearing gunfire. Weren't sure what was even happening, and we were hoping that as we were in some of these holes, that our fellow cops who were assigned to the tactical end were defending us because we thought we were they were having a ground war up there, and we were like, holy shit!
It's interesting that you were in the pile. You couldn't see what was going on up top, and you thought there was a ground war.
Yeah,
you were up top, but still couldn't see anything, and you also thought there was a ground war. I think that just paints an even better picture to everybody who's listening to really show that nobody, no matter where you were, knew what the fuck was going on.
No. And we also were hearing fighter jets flying overhead, and we were like, are they ours? you know, or are they some country, or what the hell's going on, or is that another plane coming in? It was incredible. And you know, as a cop, when you hear gunfire, you want to run to that gunfire, but we couldn't. We needed to look for civilians, every one of us, and there were hundreds of us that were looking, not just emergency cops, everybody, regular cops, firefighters, EMS workers, civilians, construction workers. Everybody was looking for survivors. Everybody thought that there were going to be more survivors than there were. Searching all day long. And then finally, Building 7 comes down. This is about 5:20, 5:15 at night. I don't remember the time. And that comes down. So we were told to get off the pile, which the Trade Center was the Trade Center. And it was the Trade Center for days. And then it morphed into the pile. And then weeks later, it morphed into Ground Zero. And I don't know how it changed names, but that's the way it came. So they pulled us off the pile to regroup, find out if we lost anybody else. And they didn't want us to go back into the debris field yet until they got a better accounting of who's missing. So Timmy Adrian, one of our bosses, Sergeant, he's like, we were in a building on, I think on the south side of, down on Trinity Avenue and Trinity Place. And he says, come on, we can't go in the pile, but let's go search some of the buildings around it that got clawed and destroyed from the rubble. So we're on the south side of Liberty, and we're climbing into some building, probably out to the third floor or so, because the debris pile was that high, because it was everywhere. And we didn't find anybody. We'd come out, and on the wall, in the dust, we'd write NYPD issue, and we'd write the time so that they would know that it was searched, and you know, the primary search anyway. Mm-hmm. So we came out of one building, go into another, and we came out of this one building, and a firefighter comes over yelling to us. He goes, "Hey, issue!" We're like, "Yeah, what's up?" And he goes, "Yeah, you got two guys that are you know hurt in the middle of the pile." And we're like, "Where are they?" "Yeah, they're over there somewhere." So we thought they were like a surface rescue, like us. They had come after, like us. They had come after the Trade Center, collapsed. Not everybody had radios, so it's quite plausible that you know they were just roaming around and twisted an ankle or broke a leg or something. So we go climbing over all the debris piles over to this one area, and Greg Welch from one truck was in front of me. He slips, slices up his leg pretty good, and I stop. I'm like, "Greg, you all right?" Yeah, go get those guys and get out of here. So as we're climbing over more piles of debris, a battalion chief, I'm pretty sure it was a battalion chief, he's like, "Hey guys, so you can't come past here. Stop! It's a collapse zone. Buildings 4 and 5 were still on fire, and they were starting to collapse onto the Trade Center." So as we're climbing towards him, he says, we're telling him, "Hey, we just got two guys we got to get. We'll be out of here." And he's like, "No, you guys, please don't come in here. Don't come in here." So we kind of blew him off a little bit. He was trying to do the right thing, but we kind of blew him off. And there was and this is about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night ago or so. And there's a guy waving a flashlight. And I say this from day one. He could have been the Pope. I have no idea what he looked like, who he was, and I didn't find out till years later who he was. And I get up next to him, and I said, "Well, hey, what do you got?" He says, "There's two cops in this hole. You know, we can hear them, but we can't get to them." And I'm like, "Okay." And I look down in this hole, and it's about the size of a manhole, this opening in all this debris field. And it's about a 6 to 8 foot drop. I drop down into that hole, and there's this Marine is in there. This Sergeant Carnes is in there. And he says, "Yeah, we can't get to these guys. You know, they're here. We just can't get to them." So Chuck Sirica, as a former paramedic, comes in, who he just saw what was going on TV and decided to help. Incredible, right? And Patty McGee, who was part of emergency with us, he came in behind us. And we're in this cramped opening, the four of us, and then Chuck sees this opening on the right-hand side, and he didn't have any equipment on other than a shirt that said paramedic on it. So he crawls down and twisting around. He yells back, "Hey, I can get to him, but you can't fit down here with your stuff on." So I take off my air pack, I take off my rope harness, I take off my gum belt, and I know that my gum belt would not have helped me down there, right? It's a gun belt.
Right.
It's not a rescue, and there's no rescue equipment on it. We're going into a hole of a building collapse, and we're going to dig somebody out, and it's not going to help me. But a cop never gives up his gun.
Right.
And it was unnerving to me to give up my gun. And I'm like, holy shit, it's over, right? So I pass my gun belt up, and I start climbing down into this hole, and it's about a 20-foot angle, 20-foot length on an angle, and we're crawling around twisted I-beams and pulling ourselves through these tiny, tiny openings, and some of these I-beams are burning hot, and I'm saying to myself, I'm telling to my boys, be good, make me proud, take care of Mom, because I don't think I'm coming out. I apologize to them for getting killed, and just continue with life and take care of Mom. And I said this to myself as I'm crawling through this, down into these openings. They were so tight we couldn't even turn around to back out if we wanted to. We get down to the bottom of this one hole, this one area, and there's a police officer who we've come to learn is Dominic Pizzullo. He's dead. He's crushed. He's definitely not alive. Just past him is Will, another Port Authority police officer. Will looked like he was poured out of a dump truck. He is completely covered in debris. The only thing you can see him is his head and his right arm and part of his right side. He's laying on his back, and he's looking at us. And to get to Will, we had to only one person could fit at a time. We had to crawl through a space that is smaller than the opening of the chairs that we're sitting under on. That opening below our chairs. That we had to crawl in, and we had to crawl in hands first and pull ourselves in. And I'm laying on my side, and I'm just clawing away at the rubble. I'm taking some of the rubble, and I'm passing it down along my chest to Chuck and Patty McGee. And Patty McGee would take that rubble and throw it down this one elevator shaft that we were next to, just to get. We had no place to put it. You could only be in the environment that Will was in and we were in, working for about 15, 20 minutes or so, because you couldn't breathe. You couldn't breathe because of the smoke from the fires and the dust. It was just so hot. So we were dry heaving in there. We were choking in the hole. I'd back out. Chuck would go in. Chuck would claw away at it and do the same thing I would do. And Patty would take the stuff and he would throw it down. Patty covers up Dominic out of respect with a jacket. And we literally had to climb over Dominic to get to Patty. And it's certainly difficult doing that, especially when, it's a brother in blue. But we had a light here. We had something to hold on to after all day of searching and finding nobody, just deceased people and body parts. We got somebody who was alive. So Chuck and I kept tag teaming Will, and Will had an air pack on like we did, and the medic had a pair of scissors, shears. So I took those. We cut his air pack off when we got enough space out around it, and I yanked out the air pack from underneath him, and we passed that back out of the hole. And I thought Will was free, and we wrapped these extenders, which we use when we climb bridges. It's a lanyard with two hooks on the end. They wrap them around his chest, and I'm trying to pull Will out, and Will's in pain. I'm causing him so much more pain, and I'm like, I'm sorry, Will. He's like, don't worry about me. Don't worry about me. You got to get to my partner. And I'm like, your partner's dead. There's a Dominic. He's dead, and I'm not telling him he's gonna, because he doesn't know. Right. So I'm not telling him he's gonna die because I don't want Will to lose hope. So I'm like, hey, Will, we got to get you out first, then we got to get to your partner. That's just the way it's got to be. He's like, all right, get them. Don't worry about me. You get to my partner. So I'm yanking on Will. I can't get him out. Chuck comes in, and we are literally chest to chest in this opening, no bigger than the opening below your chairs. And both of us are on our sides, and we're trying to pull Will out. And I said, yeah, sure, it's got to be the fat guy, right?
You know what they say, right? Jealousy is the highest form of flattery. Yeah, but my wife's Italian, we cook good.
That's what he said.
We can equate it to the bloating, though, of the compartment syndrome.
Actually, yes.
Yeah.
So he says, oh, my wife's a good cook.
But again, laughter was important on that. We really needed it.
And we were joking.
Before you guys were even doing that, I mean, what was the conversation, before you said we have to get to your partner? You're seeing him, and is he...
Well, I'll go back to where he really is my hero, not only for pulling me out, but when he got down there, I'm a rookie guy, and I'm 33, I've been in the Navy, but I'm hyperventilating. He was the one that calmed me down. He was the one that said, hey, you need to keep fighting. You need to stay focused. And I did. And that helped me. I mean, he really helped calm me down. And then I realized, like I said, when I cringed the rest of the night, and correct me if I'm wrong, I just shut up because I knew, like, I got to let them work. And that, let me tell you, it wasn't easy, but he really, and again, the years of experience, he's a senior officer, has been through a lot. I would say John Wick has nothing on this guy.
Yeah.
Like if you saw his rack, and he'll never, ever talk about it. And I've learned about that. The guys that talk haven't seen shit. Mm-hmm. The guys that are quiet, because, and I still don't feel like I deserve that, but us who have seen things, you don't want to brag about that stuff.
Right.
But his experience helped me at that moment to calm down and be able to compose myself.
So it didn't work. We couldn't get him out. And he was like, oh, my leg's pinned. So now, all of a sudden, Sergeant McLoughlin, we didn't even know was in the hole, says, how are you guys doing? I'm like, who the hell is that?
I wish we could have filmed that. Let me tell you, it was priceless.
So Will's like, that's my partner. I go, I thought that's your partner. I pointed down, I'm like, no, that's Dominic. He's dead. And I'm like, oh, freak. So now it became real. Now it became that I wasn't lying to Will anymore, that we had to get him out because where John's voice was coming from was deeper in. So I said, McLoughlin, John McLoughlin? He's like, yeah, who's that? I go, Scott Strauss. He goes, hey, Scott. And I'm like, hey, Scott, this is how you're talking to me? He was in a tremendous amount of pain, and but you could tell in his voice it was taking its toll, and had taken its toll the whole day. He was getting weaker and weaker and weaker, even just through the rescue operation, which we didn't think Will or John were going to make it through. These guys were pinned bad, buried bad, and they were hurt bad. So we kept digging, and Patty McGee, Patty McGee, Irish, born on St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, really?
He's in the pipe band. You don't get much more Irish than that.
Yeah.
His son followed his footsteps. He's in the Port Authority Police Department Academy right now.
Awesome, great. I wish him the best of luck.
Yeah, so he's talking to John McLoughlin, and he called him Irish Eyes, and he's like, "Hey, Irish Eyes, you with us?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm here. You can tell he's being very groggy." And then there came a time where John didn't answer, and we thought he passed away. And Will was getting excited, saying, John, Sarge, where are you? Answer me. We're like, Will, hey, come on, Jim, stay calm. We got to get you out of here. He's not, Sarge, you answer me. And he was not answering. And I look at Patty, and Patty kept saying, hey, Irish Eyes. And I look at Patty like, shut up. Just let it go. Let's get our minds off of something else.
Yeah.
And then Will's like, cut my leg off. You got to get to that sergeant. And I'm like, Will, I got nothing to cut your leg off with. And I didn't realize till later on that they had a team of doctors above us ready to talk us through the amputation.
Wow.
And then the Marine who was digging a hole down from the top, who we asked him to stop because he was doing the right thing, but the debris was falling right on top of Will and on top of us.
Yeah.
So he says, hey, use this. And so Will's like, cut my leg off. I go, I don't have anything to cut your leg off with, Will. And so then the Marine goes, here, use this. And I'm like, what the? He hands down this Marine knife. And I'm like, I'm not cutting this guy's leg off. So Will's like, no, cut my leg off. And I'm like, I'm not cutting your leg off. One, I wanted to take him out in one piece. And two, I didn't want to cut his leg off. How do you do it with us?
Might have been pretty brutal, though.
Yeah, cut up like a steak or something. I know we're making fun of it, but it was some like, what the hell, man? I'm not going to cut this man's leg off in a hole and like this.
But that's how desperate we were. I mean, it was bad. The situation was like really bad. The
firefighters up above us were yelling down to get out. They can't control the fires anymore. The fires that we were in, the pile we were in was on fire. It was still shifting. Buildings 4 and 5 that have been burning all day are starting to collapse on top of them, which is on top of us. And Patty kept yelling, yeah, F you, we're not leaving. We're not leaving. Yeah. Patty, Chuck, and I made a conscious decision to stay.
Yeah.
Did I want to go? Bet your ass I did. But how do I leave Will and John?
Yeah.
You can't leave them.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with macho nonsense. It just had to do with self-preservation. How do I go home to my kids and hug them and live my life when I let these two guys die without trying to save them? So the three of us made a conscious decision to stay, and if it happened, it happened. And if we got them out, okay. But we were ready to deal with the consequences.
And they said that
everything's come
because
down.
at one point I realized it's okay for them to leave. I didn't want them to die, but I remember Scott saying, we're together, and there's a lot of people up there. If this all collapses on us, they know where we're at.
Yeah.
So Will's talking about his leg's pinned. So now with the opening, when I pulled the Scott pack out from under the air pack out from underneath him, the diameter of a bottle is probably 10 inches. So that's the amount of space that he now has above his chest from the cement slab that seemed to go on forever over to his left. So I crawled. I was thinner then, but I crawled into that 10-inch space, and I'm struggling and I'm crushing Will. And Will, I am causing him more pain. And I'm like, I kept apologizing, and I'm like, I'm sorry, Will. I'm sorry. I got to find out what's wrong with your leg. And he's like, don't worry about me. Don't worry. Just do what you got to do. You got to get to the sergeant. So I look at a flashlight with a tiny flashlight, and I see that there looks like a cinder block wall pinning his left femur down to below the pile. I can't scratch away underneath it, so I'm trying to figure out how to get the cinder block wall off his leg. I climb back out of the hole, and I say, give me an air chisel, a Paratech air tool, which is like a jackhammer, small jackhammer. They couldn't find one, right? I don't know. There's thousands of dollars of rescue equipment up there, and they couldn't come up with this. I know a lot of stuff got crushed, and and maybe they didn't have it right there. But they asked about, hey, can we send down airbags, lifting bags? And I said, no, they're not going to fit. It's too small an opening. They said, well, how about a battery-operated Hearst tool? I'm like, well, if you think it's going to fit, you couldn't get a conventional one down there that runs on a generator or a pump, but I'll try a battery-operated one. So they drag this thing, send it down into the hole, and I take this, and it's pretty long and it's pretty heavy, and I only got this 10-inch gap, and I drag this thing up, fighting with this and pushing it up through that little hole, which is no bigger than the size of the chair that we're sitting under. Oh, by the way, the place of refuge where we went, we meaning Chuck and I, after you had enough, you needed a little bit of a break digging on Will. I'd crawl out, and Chuck would crawl into Will. Right where Dominic was and Patty was is an area that's no bigger than what's underneath the table that we're leaning on. You couldn't stand up. We were just cramped, going from one cramped area to another cramped area, and there was no relief. The smoke, the dust, it was the heat was just incredible. So we get this Hearst tool, and I'm jamming it in through this opening over Will's chest, and I am causing him more pain, and I'm apologizing, and he's like, just get to the sergeant. Don't worry about me. Just get to the sergeant. And I get it to the other side of him, and I'm now I'm perpendicular to Will. Will's on his back. I'm leaning in over my chest is on his chest, and I'm using him as leverage, and I'm trying to get this Hearst tool, the jaws, into the right spot. And I think I got it in the right spot, and I back out, and I tell Chuck and Patty to get out because I don't know what it's holding up. And if it all comes down, no sense everybody getting killed. Chuck and Patty like, well, we ain't leaving. We came in together. We're getting him out together. And I go, okay. So Will's like, could you stop talking and get me out? So as I crawling back in over Will, again, I said to my kids, to myself, I'm sorry, guys. Did the best I could. Just trying to get Will out, and I can't leave him. Did I want to leave? Like everybody was telling us to get out of there, because they were in a bad spot too. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So I said to Will before I operated the jaws, I said, I have no idea what's going to happen here, Will. If it works, we're out of here. If it doesn't work, and this whole thing comes down on us, there's 1,000 people that know exactly where we are, and they'll start digging right away. And he's like, just go ahead. I'm okay with it. So I operate the tool, the jaws start to move, and it's not enough. The opening's not enough. I'm like, crap. I crawl out, and Chuck's like, what's the matter? I go, it's not, the jaws aren't big enough. He says, let me go and try it. So he climbs in there, and he throws some debris into where the jaws were, kind of like a cribbing, to take up the extra space. Why I didn't think of it, I don't know. I chalk it up to being completely exhausted in my mind. Yeah. So he crawls out. He says, try this. So I go back in, and I say, Will, here we go. And it cracks a piece of cinder block, and the cinder block's free. And I'm like, holy shit, we got him out, right? So Chuck comes back into me, and we're chest to chest again, and we're pulling on Will, yanking him out, and we're exhausted. And Will's, my foot is stuck, and I'm like, what the fuck now, right? So I crawl. Will's on his back. I crawl over on his chest, and I'm trying to get down to his legs on top of him in this tiny opening that we're in. And I said, yeah, why can't it be a female cop? my knees are by his head, and my head's by his knees. And I'm like, why can't it be a female cop?
It's called the 69, just to let you know.
Gallows humor, right? Cops humor.
It was good.
Yeah, we were cracking some jokes down there because none of us thought we were coming out. You know, I don't even think Will would. He was coming out. Hey, it was some tough spots. So I see a piece of rebar that's pinning Will's foot down, and I'm trying to yank Will's foot out. Now I'm laying on top of him in the small opening, and I am causing him more pain, and I just kept apologizing to him. John McLoughlin wakes up, and he starts to talk again, and with a sigh of relief. And then Will's like, I could feel the relief. He's like, oh, God, thank God he didn't die. And we're like, John, hang in there, man. We almost got Will out. And he's like, okay, all right, just take care of Will. You get to me. I couldn't get his leg out from underneath this rebar. I couldn't reach it. So I yelled back to Patty, I need something to lift this piece of rebar. And I don't know where he found it in the rubble, but it was the perfect length. It was the perfect bend, a piece of rebar that he passed up to me. And I'm laying on my stomach down by Will's legs, and I'm crushed in this area, and I got this piece of rebar in the right spot, and I lift the rebar up, and I go to grab Will's leg, and I can't, it's coming down again. I needed more than two hands. So I asked Chuck, I said, Chuck, try to get in here. So Chuck comes in, and he couldn't get in, but he could reach one arm in. So he's just stretching his one arm in, and I put it on Will's pant leg. And I said, all right, when I tell you to pull, pull. So I'm using both arms. I'm laying on my stomach. I'm lifting it up, and I go, pull. And he's fighting, and Will is screaming in pain. He's in a bad spot, and we get him free. So I'm like, holy shit, we got him out. Chuck and I pull him out into this opening. And now all the time that we were doing this, the guys above us were digging their way down to us. There's no way we could get Will out or anybody out the way we got in there. We couldn't even get out the way we got in. So they were digging an opening to us all the while we were working on Will. So we got Will free. They send down next to Dominic a Stokes basket, and we slide Will into the Stokes basket, and we send him up topside. I crawl back into the hole, and I say to John, listen, John, I'm absolutely shot. This is I'm going to say close to midnight now. I've been up since, this is midnight on September 11th. I've been up since the morning of September 10th, and working in the environment that we were working in for the last, 12 hours or so. It was just absolutely brutal. I said, I'm physically shot. I'm no help to you. There's a fresh team coming in right now, and they're going to get you out. He says, all right, thanks. I appreciate it. Take care of Will. And I'm like, John, we'll get you out. We'll see you up top. And he's like, okay. And I didn't think, we were afraid he was going to give up. Like, he got his men out.
Yeah.
And he's going to just say, okay, I did my job, and he was going to give up. I get up topside, and all I wanted to do was stand up and take a breath of fresh air. I couldn't do either. I was so cramped from being in a cramped spot. It was difficult to stand up. I had debris in my eyes. I was covered in debris, and the smoke and the dust up top was just as bad as it was down below. And Kenny Winkler, who I worked the midnight with, was there running, getting all our equipment and coordinating things on the top of that pile. I said, Kenny, it's John McLoughlin down in the hole, and he's like, we got it, Scott. We'll get him out, and they got him out the next morning. I'm coming down the line. And I couldn't see. I'm holding on to a police officer in front of me, and I got a police officer behind me trying to help me because it was difficult to walk. I have a line of rescuers, and everybody's here holding on to me and help me down the line. And I hear a voice that night, September 11th, was my fire department company meeting. And I hear this voice, this guy who was in the fire department with me in Mineola, he says, "Hey, I guess you didn't make the meeting either." And I couldn't see who it was, but I could tell by his voice who it was. I go, "Hey, Zeus," he was a city fireman. I said, "I'm glad to hear your voice." And he goes, "How do you know it's me?" He goes, "You got that distinct voice, Zeus." And he goes, "Stay safe. I go, you too." And they take me to Bellevue. And I was just worried about them cutting my pants off, right? And because we had no money, and these were relatively new pants. So I go down to the ambulance. I'm like, "Don't cut my pants off." And the medics are like, "Why?" I'm like, "Because I'm not hurt. I just can't breathe, you know." So they take me to Bellevue, and my partner, who retired in March of 2001, saw what happened that day. He comes home. He gets on. He sees what's happening. He goes down into the basement, gets his old police uniform from emergency uniform, puts it on. He goes to the hospital. Goes to one truck, and he's answering phones and things and running a show there. Word gets back to him that his brother, who was also in emergency, was hurt and had taken him to Bellevue. It ended up being May. So he meets me at the hospital. I'm like, "What are you doing here?" He goes, "You think I was missing this?" You know, and so they kept me in the hospital till the next morning. And then I go back to one truck, and it's probably like 11, 12 o'clock in the morning. And the lieutenant's there, and he says, "Listen, do whatever you want to do, but I need you back here at 5 o'clock. Because they have, you can't work 24 hours straight. You got to break this up." So that's what they were looking to do. So this is September 12th, about 12 o'clock in the afternoon. So I wasn't sure what to do. I said, "You know what? Let me go home and try to get a couple hours sleep, and then I'll come back." So I go home. I couldn't sleep. The adrenaline is still pumping. And I see, my boys are getting off the bus at 3 o'clock. So they get off the bus, and giving them hugs. And they're like, Daddy, you okay?" And I'm like, "I'm okay, but I got to go back to work." And they're like, "Dad, don't go back to work. We don't want you to die like everybody else did." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, I got to go to work. I got to go back there." I left them crying with Pat, my wife, and I went back to work. And it was one day morphed into the next, into the next, into the next, and you weren't sleeping. You were looking for survivors. You weren't finding anybody. What we did find haunts us to this day. The body parts, the people, parts of people, images nobody should see, and none of us will ever forget. But New York City police officers and New York City firefighters and rescue workers and EMS people and volunteers who were volunteering down there were like rock stars. They were superheroes, And there was one day we were driving from 21st Street, our building on 21st Street. We're in a police van. And we're coming along the West Side Highway, and there were people lined the highway, and they were applauding for us. And this is probably 4 or 5 days in, maybe more. And they're holding up signs, "Thank you, you're our hero." And we're so tired, and we're just punchy. And we're like, "Oh, look at these guys. We must be in a fire truck, because nobody likes a cop, right? Everybody loves a fireman." So we're joking, and we're laughing and carrying on. And then there's one sign. This kid, he's probably about 7, 8 years old, about the same age as my boys. He holds a sign up and says, "Please find my daddy." And that kind of brought us back to what we were there for, and with the laughing stopped and the joking stopped, and we continued searching. And Will said, they call us heroes. I worked with heroes. Plenty of heroes wearing a blue uniform today. They're heroes. I'm not a hero. I worked with heroes. But also the heroes of the families of the people who died that day. Thank you. But the kids, the funerals that we had to go to, the kids had to go on with their lives, and the parents, the spouses, the families had to go on. They had to go to school eventually, go back to school. They had to go on with their lives, they're the heroes, and the people that are struggling and the families that are struggling with the illnesses today, they're heroes. I was just doing my job and it was just out of self-preservation that I didn't run.
How have you dealt with the visions that you're recounting for us now? How have you dealt with those and learned to cope going on from there?
Tough. September 11th time frame. Mm-hmm. Tough. Doing these podcasts. Tough.
Yeah.
But it's I'm going to say it's a good story. Do
you find it helps you to talk about it, or?
I don't. I don't think so. You know, because it hurt. It's painful.
Yeah,
it's painful still. But I don't have survivor. I don't think I have survivor's guilt because I helped somebody get out. Even though I lost 14 friends. And more since 9/11, lost 14 that day, and more, unfortunately, have and will continue to pass away. But I don't know, I just feel I helped. I was part of a rescue team, literally hundreds of people to bring to home.
Yeah.
So I think that helps me cope with that.
We had been talking about this before we went on air. Why we were doing this podcast to begin with, especially the 9/11 series. We're approaching the 21st anniversary of that day. For those who are just now getting into the academy, whether it's police, fire, EMS, NYPD, Port Authority, FDNY, some of those guys and gals that are getting into the academy weren't even born when 9/11 happened. When Joe and I and Eric were talking about doing this series, we had put it on social media and we were asking if anybody wanted to actually come on the show. And we had received some negative comments, not a lot, but some, from those who were rescue workers on 9/11, from multiple different agencies. Most of the feedback we got was very positive. Some were negative, and they said, why would I want to relive that day? And I had replied that if we don't continue telling these stories, because of how it's 21 years already. It feels like yesterday for all of us, right? I was only 11 years old when it happened. I remember it like it was yesterday, though. And if we don't continue telling these stories, eventually they're going to die out.
Yeah.
And the 343 FDNY, 37 Port Authority, 23 NYPD, and then those who have passed from the federal agencies, the court officers, the medics, the construction workers. I mean, those men and women are the heroes, right? They're the ones who didn't have the chance to survive. Those names will be forgotten. I mean, yeah, they're literally right above us right now. So we're at the base of the South Tower. Above us is the reflection pools. Their names are all etched on the side of those reflection pools. But if it weren't for these stories and for those etchings, nobody would know who they were. So that's why we're doing this podcast. And again, I can't thank you guys enough for telling the story.
It's important that the story gets told, even though it's as painful as it is. Parts of it, some parts we laughed, but some parts are incredibly painful to relive. But if you don't tell the stories, as you said, it gets forgotten. And I tell the story because in honor of, listen, I didn't do it alone, right? There was a whole team of emergency cops, regular cops, every rescue workers all over helping. I just happened to be in the hole. Other cops would have been there if it wasn't me. And I'm telling that story for them to let everybody know the heroics that went on above us, as well as around us during the day, and tell the story that 14 of our friends can't tell. These guys and the women, men and women, were in there fighting a fight. They knew how. They could have ran. They didn't have to go in those buildings. Nobody had to go in those buildings, but they did. Firefighters, rescue workers, cops, EMS, everybody did their share. And I don't want anybody to think that it was just the rescuers that were rescuing people. There was the civilians were helping each other. Mrs. Jones was helping Mr. Smith, and John Q. Public was helping people he didn't even know. And it was
Chuck
just
Sharika was in the hole with you.
the two Marines.
Two Marines. And I just want to say to those, you're always going to get negative comments. And I understand that this is hurtful, but it's very important that we never forget. Those words is something that I tell every school I speak to. We can never forget. Again, going back to what I talked about, growing up, being inspired by the stories of brave Americans. It's a story of America. And if we don't pass these stories down, like you said, not only will it be forgotten, future generations won't understand what we can triumph. We got Pearl Harbor. The last of those sailors, Marines, airmen, Army men, they're precious. Their stories mean so much. I've been able to meet some of them. And I think it's important that we tell the stories. And that's why I said everybody's story is important. Even if you don't, the advantage you have today is if you don't like this podcast or because it opens wounds, you don't have to listen to it. But some child growing up will listen to this podcast who might eventually grow up to be a police officer and either find themselves in a position I did or find themselves in a position Scott did and could say, hey, I remember that story. If I'm the guy buried, I know not to give up. If I'm the guy doing the rescue, I know what I got to do. And so that's what we're teaching. It's educating people, because it's twofold now, 21 years later. We're remembering, but we need to teach.
And there's so many stories. Sorry, Wilson.
No.
There's stories that I just learned last year.
Yeah.
That through an event that Will and I did. That there was two people who carried down a lady who was in a wheelchair. 68 floors.
Wow.
They didn't have to do that.
No.
The one building came down already. They didn't have to take this lady down and risk their lives, and they just cleared the building when it came down. They could have left her there, but it's just New Yorkers and people helping people, and civilians and helping civilians, and nobody cared who you voted for or what you did.
That day was a perfect.
Americans helping Americans.
September 12th was something I wish I could take an injection and shoot it into this country right
great.
now.
The patriotism.
The left,
incredible.
right, all that because politics ruins everything. I wish I could inject all our politicians with September 12th, that they can feel it and understand, like, wait a second, we have actual enemies out there.
Yeah.
You have China, you have Russia, and the list goes on, that would love to see us destroy ourselves. And, that's why I tell a story. I want people to understand that Abraham Lincoln really said it. We'll destroy ourselves from within. We're at some turbulent times right now, but if we can inject September 12th, you know what everybody realizes? It doesn't matter who you're voting for. It's about the person. Jason Thomas, he's an African-American. He didn't know him that night. I didn't know him till the movie came out. We searched for him. That guy went and did 3 more weeks of search and rescue and disappeared. Never looked for anything until he surfaced because his aunt brought him to life.
Yeah.
Just total true heroes that went in, did what they did, no recognition just because they love America. And I think that New York that day embodies what America is. It's bigger than just New York. It's our nation, and I want people to understand that. I came from a different country. I love this country. I served in the military, almost died on 9/11. And then there were great people like Scott, Patty, Chuck, and countless rescuers and the doctors and everybody else that were able to get me home, put me together. And I'm here today with you guys, and you guys have served. You know where we're coming from. I mean, without the thin blue line, without all the first responders, there'd be total chaos. And on 9/11, what I'm most proud of is that, my actions, his actions, all our actions that day showed the cowards we're not taking a knee. We stood up in the face of evil. Yeah. And that was tough because, like Scott said, and what I've seen, it was harsh what was there, what we had to see and what we had to endure. And you would think that a country would fold. Not us. No. We stood up to that.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say after that. I think you just wrapped up the entire episode pretty clearly.
Thank you both so much for.
Thank you guys for doing this, and not only this, but the LEO weekend. Thanks. You guys are doing phenomenal work.
We're bringing a family this coming week. We just got notified. I told the both of you before today. A good friend of mine who I work with. He's one of my bosses. A friend of his is unfortunately he's in the process of passing away from 9/11 cancer, and he lives in Tennessee. I'm not going to say the name just for the family's sake, but he's coming to do a farewell tour here in the city. So law enforcement officers weekend, we're going to step up. We were asked without, no questions. We said, of course, we're going to help. And we're going to assist the family and this officer on one final ride around the city. We're going to take him on a boat around the harbor. We're going to put him on a motorcycle. He's a Harley Davidson fan. Take him out to a nice steak dinner. So
it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's what cops do. We do the right thing.
Yeah. So, it's a pleasure, and I'm from the younger generation, right? I'm a rookie in your eyes, for sure, both of your eyes, and in your eyes, definitely. You're a rookie. It's only 8 years on the job, but unfortunately, I've been told so many times that there's not enough of the camaraderie. There's not enough of the sentimental values that you learn as a police officer, and giving praise to those who are above us. And I'm hopeful that this podcast reaches the masses. We're going to do our best. We have a pretty great social media following to make sure everyone hears these stories and continue to do that. And I think that's why myself, Joe, Eric, the rest of the Law Enforcement Officers Weekend team and the rest of, those who follow us and help us with this podcast, strive to do every day.
Your words today definitely
for sure
are going to help a lot of people.
Yeah.
What you guys went through and what you guys described and how you dealt with it, it's going to help a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's going forward, even if it helps just one person.
Hey, and everybody deserves it. You do 20 years or whatever time your career is, you deserve to go home and enjoy life with your family. You know, we see some very bad things, but those bad things is what helps a lot of people every single day. And I always say I bleed blue, and I hope, like you said, that the younger generation of police officers remember, watch each other's backs, take care of each other, because we are the line. We are what holds this country together. We really do here inside the United States.
Yeah.
And hopefully we get back to where cops are heroes.
I think we will. As long
They've
as
always been my heroes. Always continue
if we
to be.
keep
And this
electing
guy right here, I love him to death.
officials.
Him, Patty, Chuck.
Yeah.
Just thank God for them, you know.
And
Thank God that lieutenant was just busting your chops, because I'm sure he's smiling today, saying, "Man, we picked a good guy."
Yeah.
So.
And to the cops out there on the street, whatever state, town, city you're in, don't give up. Keep the fight. You
Then
know
you're loved.
you know what's right.
We love you.
Not everybody hates you.
That's right. We love you.
when you hit that wall, whatever it is, even if you're trying to get into the academy and you have to pass that 1.5 mile run
right.
or the wall or whatever it is, think of the 2 stories that you just heard. If
Don't
they,
give up.
If they can do what they did, you can make that 1.5 mile run. You can make that wall. You can pass the student, whatever it is. You can do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Don't give up.
Don't give up.
Don't ever give up.
That's the name of this episode. Don't give up.
Don't give up.
These stories have, again, just been absolutely amazing. I can't thank the 2 of you guys enough. Before we end, I just want to give a few special shout outs. First and foremost, huge shout out to the 9/11 Museum for allowing us to be here. We're going to hopefully come back in a few weeks and actually do an interview with them as well. We're going to do an interview with Chief Tobin from the NYPD and hear her 9/11 story. A big shout out to Port Authority, the Port Authority Police Department of New York and New Jersey, the Port Authority PBA, the NYPD, the FDNY, just everyone who we work with have just been phenomenal. They're true supporters of this podcast, of the organization. And if it wasn't for their support, we wouldn't be able to do this. And Scott, thank you again for helping us set this up to begin with. So
Thanks, sir.
if you haven't come to the 9/11 memorial, please, if you're coming to New York City, I know it's tough to see and to hear the stories, but come here, support, donate to the memorial, because if we don't, we just lost a memorial the other day. They had to close down. So to confirm, to make sure everyone's aware, everyone thinks it's this memorial. The media hasn't done a good job explaining which memorial it actually was. Yeah. So that wasn't this memorial, but to make sure that doesn't happen to this one, please come, donate, spend your time here at the Trade Center, but respect it. I can't tell you how many times I've come here and I see children and adults taking selfies, climbing on the rocks, climbing on the trees. They just don't understand that this is sacred ground to so many of us. So if you do come to New York City, which we highly encourage, and you come to the 9/11 Memorial, just respect it for what it is. That's all I can certainly ask for.
No,
So,
absolutely.
with that being said, this has been another phenomenal episode.
Amazing.
2 episodes of the Muscle Room Podcast. Thank you for listening. And again, if you do need help with PTSD or suicide awareness, we'll definitely on the website. We're going to put some links. We're going to put some links on some of the photos of the area before we leave, just so everyone could kind of get an understanding of where we are right now.
Yeah.
And be safe out there, and we'll see you guys next week.
Get home to your families.
Yeah.
Thank you.